Hi, everyone. It is Matt Kruger from the E.P.B.A. I have with me Peter Brill, and he is from the Brill Legal Group. Peter and I have been we've had many dialogues. We joined forces around Peter, I think it was like 2019, March, right? We started talking?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. And he's been nothing but a plethora of knowledge, huge support, an amazing litigator with all cases we've already had for our cops, and has worked with many of us already. Peter works around the clock. There's a lot of people that reach out constantly. And it's not that sometimes we can't get a hold of me or Peter or anyone, it's that they're literally working. We are working around the clock most of the time. I think even last night, we had a situation where I gave Peter, it was like around 9:30 at night, and Mr. Brill out of nowhere responded at 9:50 and helped someone already. So it was an amazing thing to watch and see. We do know that there's people out there that get frustrated with the process and the system of how long things take. And Peter's always reassuring me, these things do take time. So with that said, I have Peter Brill, and sir, thank you again for joining tonight, and thank you for the members. If you guys are going to be watching this, it is quite a great thing to have Peter on with us tonight. So this is the man behind the curtain as well. Obviously, we all know there's other people involved, but Peter seems to be, he's been the main guy. I would say right now, and we'll probably go through the questions a little bit later, but I'm almost up to, I believe we have almost 22 or 23 people within the DEP Police Department that have been helped by your organization already. Is that correct, Peter?
I'd say so. I think, yeah, somewhere 22 to 25, and there've been some informal, just, informational type calls, and I think some more formal ones are probably in the upwards of 20, sure.
Yeah, amazing work this man has been doing. So right now, Peter, I'm just going to ask you a few questions just so our viewers can start getting to know who you really are. So how did you get into law?
Law and Order, too many reruns. I could go into a long story about my father and all that, but basically, I was a philosophy major in college, and what do you do with a philosophy major? But you can go teach philosophy. I wasn't going to do that, or go to law school. So I went to law school. I never really wanted to work in a big corporate firm. I never really wanted to make big companies more money. I always wanted to figure out a way to help people. So actually, I wound up in the Nassau DA's office after law school, and continued from there. It was something that I thought was very gratifying, being able to help people in their time of need. Although you guys are a lot better paid than I was, starting out at $32,000 a year. Unfortunately, I had to move on from there. But I was able to, right after that, shortly after that, join a firm that represented the detectives, lieutenants, and captains unions for the NYPD, along with a number of other law enforcement unions on a more of a piecemeal basis. And I did that for almost 15 years.
Wow. So 15 years. So how long have we been practicing law? How long have you been practicing now?
Yeah, so I was admitted to practice in '98. I left the DA's office after my 3-year commitment, so 2000, 2001. And I started at the end of 2000 defending law enforcement. I've been doing that ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. So, wow, 1998 is when we started. We have officers that weren't we have officers that were born before that, at least.
Right. Well, it's nice to bring. There are very few people who do this type of work. Obviously, law enforcement is a unique community, especially when law enforcement officers get in trouble.
Yes.
You're not necessarily going to go to a, regular criminal defense lawyer because they don't understand all the inner workings of A, what you do, and B, the perils and the pitfalls of being a law enforcement officer involved in whether it's an on-the-job issue or, you know, a personal issue. I mean, you get involved in a domestic or a DWI or something like that, God forbid. And there are all these other considerations that, you know, your lawyer from, you know, down the street, you know, probably doesn't know how to deal with. We run into these problems with guns all the time, for example, where, you know, an order of protection gets issued and the order of protection says you have to hand in your guns.
Right.
And all of a sudden you can't go to work. Right. And most lawyers don't realize that. They call us up and we have to scramble to, you know, fix the other lawyer's problem. So that's just one minor example.
And then their rubber guns sitting there. What do we do? What do we do?
Right. Right.
I think that was my biggest uphill battle, Peter, was trying to find an attorney that would help mitigate and help cops at that time frame. And then, you know, we went into the COVID around that time frame. I think that was when we were shutting down. Right before we even met, I think that was right around that tipping point. And then obviously with the optics that happened with everything else thereafter. But it was very difficult, and it was great that first day when we did meet, and I was very excited. I was thrilled to even be talking with you about this stuff. So some of the practice of laws that you've had criminal defense, you did fraud and theft and white collar crimes, internet crimes, domestic violence, sex crimes. You've handled DUIs, DWIs, disciplinary hearings and investigations. I would like to talk more about the disciplinary hearings and investigations. What types of disciplinary hearings have you handled that come to mind right now?
Sure. You know, during my time now, so I started doing that in 2000. So we're talking about, you know, 21, 22 years. At this point, I think I've handled disciplinary proceedings for most of the unions in New York City. Never done one fully through yet for the DEP, thank God, because we've been able to resolve them without having to go all the way to a hearing so far. But NYPD, FDNY, DOT, I've done some. They're all very similar in some ways. Yeah, like once you understand the basics of how to do them, you can apply it from profession to profession and job to job. But obviously, they're unique depending on an individual's job and job description and the different requirements that they need. But the disciplinary hearings that we're talking about, they are when the job, usually the department advocate or the labor and employment department of whatever individual agency within the city or within the state, files charges against a member. And then those charges have to be adjudicated in some way, right? Yes. We don't like certain approaches that other people might take to simply do whatever we can to keep your job, when, you know, that might include bending way over and taking whatever it is you're given. We don't think that that's an appropriate or you know, it doesn't really command the respect that, you know, the membership needs to make sure that they're not mistreated. We really need an aggressive pushback against an agency that just simply thinks that you should take whatever they give, right? You lose your vacation days, or lose or get fined or whatever else, you know, and just get dictated to it. You know, that you need a robust defense, and that's, you know, any part of any labor organization, you have to have that pushback, not only at the negotiation table for your contract, but when it comes to the people who are being disciplined, because the people who are being disciplined might deserve it, or they might, as we've seen many times, be just the target of an unhappy supervisor. You know, it could be a union boss, it could be a president of a union. We've seen, I mean, it was years ago, but random drug tests on the same day for the head of all 3 major police unions. Very random. You know, and that's the stuff that really can't be acceptable and can't be accepted, because labor, you know, despite all this talk about police unions being different than other unions, police unions represent working people. Yes. And labor needs to be protected against management, no matter what.
That's correct. That is right. Even sometimes we have to be the voice for managers. There's still that optic of, well, they're an employer and they have a job to do. And then sometimes people get involved in their politics and even their own little case laws that we can't allow them to progress that way.
Right.
Because then it sets the precedence, like you said, for others. Going into all that, I mean, we picked you up during one of the most, I would say, the most dramatic times for law enforcement. So you had some pretty significant cases. I know we're not going to discuss some of them, but there's a few that do come to my mind that were just, I mean, you went right into it. I mean, it was amazing with all the optics that were happening across the country, and then in our backyard, within the DEP Police Department, and a New York City atmosphere, and some police officers on our job that had to face some assassination of character, I should say. And you went right into it, man, and it was amazing. It was amazing to watch and even be part of that, and be able to provide those services. So I always thank you for that, right? But I got to tell you, though, to get someone hired on right away and then boom, the country doesn't like cops all of a sudden, was nerve-wracking for me.
I know. Look, it's a vocal minority. We know that, but unfortunately, that vocal minority is in power in a lot of places. We've had
yes,
a lot of cops getting. I mean, this doesn't apply as much to DEP, but we've had cops who are being investigated because protesters are getting injured.
Right.
No one's really looking at what the protesters were doing to put themselves in the position of getting injured. It's you're the people in power, you're the people responsible. It really doesn't matter what was being done to you. You're the professional, therefore you should suck it up, and if you can't handle it, then you're the one who gets in trouble. And it's a very, very different attitude than even the attitude previously towards New York City employees. And that's got to trickle down in other ways that we've seen recently to DEP employees.
Yes, I agree. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, there's an attitude, I think, that comes from the political moment,
yes,
which can be used by management to take advantage of the members, in the name of being, politically progressive.
yes,
and look,
almost as a check in the box, Peter, as if there was a check in the box. Yes.
And there's certainly nothing wrong with the underlying concept of be nicer to people and be more open-minded about, the people you encounter. But that's stuff that I don't think our members have ever had any issues with. But to then leverage that in a way that is used to hurt members by imposing either work rules or discipline, that would not otherwise be imposed, but they're seeing it as almost a political opportunity to increase their power over the membership. That's where we have to be careful.
Yes. Have you worked? I know you mentioned earlier, but just to give the members now a clear sight, you've worked for unions before.
Sure. As I said, I started in 2000. At that point, we had contracts with the DEA, the Detectives Endowment Association, the LBA, the Lieutenants Benevolent Association. At that point, we had the CEA as well, Captain's Endowment, which had the captains, chiefs up to 2-star. Above 2-star, you stop being a civil servant. With captains, deputy inspectors, inspectors, and chiefs. And in 2005 or so, give or take, we lost the captains, but then we got the uniformed fire officers. And then that was what we had basically until 2013 when I broke up with my partners. And since then, I've gotten referrals and consistently get referrals from all of those unions. I got, even though we hadn't worked with the captains for years, I got a few weeks ago, I got a referral from the CEA. The sergeants referred me stuff. The EPBA referred me stuff, including a really intense criminal trial a couple of years ago that worked out very well. So yeah, everyone calls me, which is nice.
I know. I've talked to a lot of attorneys, and they know who you are. They always say he's the man. I always have good conversations about that. So union work, obviously, you've done, and you helped unions before. Sure. And the background that I've read up on what your firm has, grown into from 2009 and all the way up until now. It's just, I was talking with you earlier, and I was just like, I reviewed some of biography on you, and I was just like, man, this guy's, been publicized so many times. One of the things that I find interesting within the DEP police is that we don't get enough publicized. Like, we don't get publicly known as much. So when we're driving around, we're talking to people. People are like, what do you do? Hey, what's the water? How many acres? What's all this stuff? And
Right.
what you guys have police authority. And it's amazing even to hear you talk about what we say uniform service, and to have a lawyer that's on board that knows about uniform service is just an amazing thing to even have on your arsenal. So
Yeah, I mean, putting it in context, if this gets viewed a couple of years from now, we're talking right now about 3 weeks before the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
right.
And, I don't know how many members there probably very few members were on the job at 9/11. I was working in the Woolworth building, which was 2 blocks from the pit, that day, and for weeks afterwards. But at that time, one of the major things was the concern that the reservoirs were going to be poisoned. And it's amazing 20 years later how that has completely slipped out of the public eye, and it's still a major concern. And the only people standing between, God forbid, a terrorist attack like that happening and are you guys. So a tremendous amount of attention really should be paid. You're not glorified park rangers. You're an integral part of Homeland Security for the people of the city. I mean, millions of people depend on that water supply. So
FDNY, NYPD, so on and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Yeah.
The fire hydrants, you need water to go out. You need that water to be coming out.
Right.
Hygiene, just a plethora of things I can think off the top of my head, even with the environmental aspect for workers.
Yeah, and look, it's a combination, I guess, of you not being front of mind because most, if not almost everyone in the DOP police doesn't actually work in New York City.
Right.
And number two, it's, unfortunately, I think the current union structure tends to lump you in with people who maybe don't have the same critical mission. And
Right.
So your importance is kind of downplayed. You're kind of watered down in other company, So which is why it's great that you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
And hopefully there'll be some positive results from what E.P.B.A is trying to do.
There already has been, and there's a lot of thanking for you for doing that for us already. So Peter, you've had not just clients in law enforcement, but you and others. Can you share some of the vast clients that you can give on a vigorous defense or fair treatment when dealing with, like the ones that, one that came to my mind earlier and I was reviewing was the Robert Francis case. Can you elaborate a little bit with that, just to give us a little background with that officer?
Sure. We, my job when I joined that firm back in 2000 was not only to do the disciplinary work, but I took over the criminal defense department. And that was not only representing members, I think I mentioned briefly earlier, domestics and DWIs, because that's all that cops get for the most part. But their family members and their friends and their referrals. And that's continued, even though, as I said, I broke up with my partners a number of years ago. So this was a referral actually from my old firm. And this detective who had some difficulties on the job, not charges or anything like that, but he was a little bit of a difficult, he had a difficult time. And he had hit 19 3/4, like 19 7/8 years, within weeks of retirement. And he gets arrested by the Rockville Center Police Department on Long Island. And they claim that he's, I just put it, so the kids can watch. He's being a peeping Tom in people's backyards in this suburban community. So the first thing we had to do is figure out, this guy who, if convicted, that's a violation of your oath of office, and he could lose everything. And we were able to get the police commissioner to allow him to vest. So he didn't get a very small portion of his pension, but we saved the vast majority of his pension.
Saved his
That was
pension.
yeah. So that was very quick, and that was very nice. After that, in terms of his criminal case, it was actually 5 separate cases that they tried to consolidate, but we successfully argued that they shouldn't be consolidated. And then each one we successfully knocked out after, well, we wind up doing 3 trials until they gave up. I mean, and they came out within a week of him getting arrested and had to admit that the girls clearly identified a white guy as being the one who was the peeping Tom. Meanwhile, Detective Francis was incredibly dark-skinned African-American guy from, with Jamaican heritage. So, the fact that this ridiculous small-town police department decided to blame a vastly white police department and vastly white community decided to blame a black guy who they saw walking down the street for all of these peeping Tom cases so that they could clear them off their books. It was really a travesty. And again, law enforcement member, not law enforcement member, we bring the same aggressive defense to everybody. And luckily, kept his pension. He's got no criminal convictions, and he's living his life. He's all over the news, unfortunately, because that's the type of stuff that newspapers like to print. But
they're optics.
Right.
They like to assassinate.
Yeah. Sell
ratings on others.
Right.
With that said, why? I know we touched a little. We briefly touched on it. Why do you help law enforcement and first responders? I mean, what brings that attraction to that firm?
Sure. I'll tell you a story. Coming from the DA's office, obviously I worked with, police and other law enforcement officers all the time, and it was a group that I came to like. I don't have any police in my family. I wound up in a firm where my 2 partners both were the sons of police officers, but I didn't come from that background. And I guess maybe a week into my job, and I was 28 or so at the time, they start talking about, oh, this guy's going to lose, 2 weeks of vacation or 30 days of vacation. I'm like, so what? Vacation. But you come to realize that it's more than that. Not only is it your dignity, not only is it the money behind that vacation that you worked so hard for, but this is extremely important to the individual member, and ultimately became extremely important to me to make sure that these guys were treated just as fairly as anybody else. It's in vogue lately, but there are plenty of people out there, and there always have been, who denigrate police, who talk about police as the flip side of the coin from criminals, and they're just the bullies from high school who got badges and guns. All this shit that you hear, pardon my French. Right. About the whole one bad apple thing that you hear now in vogue. Oh, it's not one bad apple, it's a culture. Something just from personal experience. NYPD had 35,000 officers at one point, and 34,999 of those guys and women went home every day, did a good job, came back to work and did it all over again, and had people spit on them and scorn them, and and they had to risk getting beat up or cut or God knows what else. I mean, it's a horrific job many times. It can be a very rewarding job as well, as but I just want to make sure. I mean that members are working middle-class people just like anybody else, and they deserve a fair shake. And that's why I came to take pride in doing what I do for law enforcement.
Saving time, pension, and their family time. That's very important.
Yeah.
Always very important. Since we met, we put together, along with other litigators and an action plan, to be more specific, legal action plan together. Why was this necessary? I mean, I came to after I know it was 2018 was the Mark Janus law decision. I want to say it was June, but since then, when we met in March of 2019, we were discussing some type of insurance, something for members we can come up with, and of course it took a while, and now we're here, and we've opened up, a pretty significant action plan for people. Why were we doing that? I mean, I know the answer to that. I know you know the answer to it, but really, if you're expressing your First Amendment right to opt out and you're a law enforcement officer in this type of climate, why would you not have a backup plan? So that was something that I wanted to touch base what you thought, even as
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, the problem and the reason why people are opting out is because they don't feel they're getting adequate representation. And that is not just in the collective bargaining sense, although we know that that's completely been destroyed. But the legal representation that was being offered was subpar at best, at least from what I saw. And so the idea is until such time as there can be new union leadership or a new union completely, which is what we're aiming for currently, there needs to be a way to share costs. And it's just like any other insurance, right? If you, God forbid, get into a horrible car accident and your car is totaled, you're not reaching into your pocket for 50 grand to buy another car. That's why you pay insurance and dental insurance and health insurance and all this stuff. You spread risk out among a larger group of people so that you out of pocket don't have to bear that risk on a day-to-day basis. And so you don't know if you're going to be the next person in trouble. You don't know if you're going to be the next target of a boss. You don't know, God forbid, and this is what we're really concerned about, you get involved in something on duty and some zealous ADA, DA's office, federal prosecutor, whatever, decides that you're their next target. And a lot of that's not covered. Most of that's not covered, especially if you've opted out, none of that's covered. So if it's a choice between incompetent representation or paying a little bit out of pocket to protect yourself over time from that risk, I think you all know what the right choice there is.
I agree. I mean, so a lot of our cases in the DEP police department, and ciphering through some of them, seem to fall on the parameters of EEO and workplace violence.
Yep.
How long can an EEO case really take? Like, how long does it take if you were just to do it by yourself without a litigator, without a Peter Brill? How long do you think that would take someone? I know investigations can go for almost 18 months. I've seen a case almost last 2.5 years without any litigator involved. So roughly, and then please, if you can explain, when you have a lawyer, when you have a Peter Brill, how long would that take?
Yeah. So the concern with any internal investigation is not only the length of time, but how much advocacy you can really do for yourself if you're doing it by yourself. And this is as a complainant or as a respondent. You can be the target of EEO, workplace violence, or other disciplinary allegations. You can also be the complainant for that. And so long as we don't have conflicts of interest, we can represent you as a complainant, or we can represent you as a respondent. Either way, you're not going to be calling out the investigator or the attorney for the DEP and constantly haranguing them about what's going on with my case. When can we get this moving? Because they're not going to talk to you. They're, going to be polite. They're going to be distant, right? Because it's awkward for them talking to the person who is the subject or has made the complaint. You put a buffer, someone who can speak their same language, another lawyer in the process, and they are much more comfortable in that situation. It leads us to better outcomes, again, whether you're a complainant or a respondent. That leads us to being able to move the process along a lot faster because they can just call you up if they have a question. I mean, the folks over at labor, DEP Labor Now, they have my cell phone number. They call me right there. They have my email. They have my office. They know where to get me. And they know if they want to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
You established a rapport.
Right. We've established a rapport, and they know that if they have a quick question, they're going to be able to get a quick answer because, again, we understand the language that we're talking about, and that has to do with just being lawyers, right? We all went to law school, and B, just having done this personally for as long as I've done it, I know what they're asking, I know how to answer them, and I know how to get what I want. I'm not saying that I'm working complete miracles because, we all work within limits, but, you're going to have significant advantages in not doing it by yourself.
Thank you for that, Peter. Peter, even when time goes on and you're obligated once retained, or even some cases verbally referred, that you're behind the scenes for the clients, that you are still working on cases, even if days, months, or sometimes a year goes by. I mean, that seems to be the notion right now. Like it may seem that you can't get a hold of someone right away, and it takes time depending on the outcome. And you just said you have to have that rapport, that relationship, and things seem to go a little bit smoother. Now we have a Peter Brill. So now we have a Peter Brill, and typically if it's an EO and it's he said, she said, or something to the nature of work-related incident, we're looking at how many months, years can it take? It could take a while, right? I mean, it does take a while. It's not something that just poof, we have someone and we just, and the charges, everything just vanish and go away.
No, there's multiple stages in any case. There's an investigation, there's some negotiation. If charges are brought, then there's an actual either arbitration or generally we take these cases to oath, which is the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings for the City of New York. They're slightly different, arbitration and oath. We tend to think oath is a little fairer under the circumstances. But I mean, oath is backed up 6 months now. So that's after the first two stages, the investigation, the negotiation, and then all of a sudden you have to set an oath trial, and the oath says, oh, we're so backed up, you don't even get a trial for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So because oath is a filter for every other agency in the city, everybody goes to oath who has a labor issue. So a lot of that is completely, out of our control. It's an agency and its schedule, but you can be sure that you can get us. You might not get a call back in an hour, but you will always, hear back. And if you have any questions, you have any issues, then you just, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So how serious is it for an LEO, especially if you work for the city of New York, to have a legal action in place right now? I mean, how serious do you think we really think this could be? Like, it's got to be I know that we say DEP police, we're not doing, 3,400 calls a week, but like even today, we might have had a call out. Seriously, I mean, what's the chances of a cop right now that's carrying a gun, a vest, a shield, a lot of rounds on that person? Now they got to carry an assault rifle inside the vehicle. It behooves people to have a plan in place, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, well, I'm a police officer, I know a couple of attorneys, they like me, they'll do some pro bono, or they like me and they'll just help me out and I won't have to do anything else, right? I mean, that's what it seems like we always run into. And then all of a sudden there's some serious charges being brought up.
This world, and again, I think it's been this way for a lot longer than people think, but the world that we live in right now, especially, is not particularly law enforcement friendly.
Right.
You see members of law enforcement, NYPD, I know even around courthouses, court officers, they're going to go get something to eat, they put a jacket on over their uniform, right? Because they don't want to be in a situation where they're going to have a confrontation. And this is court officers, right? The possibly least offensive people within law enforcement. It's every moment of your life where you are representing your agency, you are a target. And I'm not saying that you're a target of violence, God forbid, but you're a target.
You're bringing a gun to the scene.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing a gun, you're bringing yourself. Some people just don't like the uniform. It doesn't matter who's in the uniform, right? So you need the protection that you can get. And okay, we're not here to sell insurance, right? But we're not talking about a tremendous investment for something that is a really, really important aspect of your life, to have the peace of mind that you're not going to be calling your uncle Bob, who does real estate law, at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, what should I do?
In your hometown or wherever you
Right.
are. And,
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking about, I think in the beginning, was, brushing up on how many counties we're in. We're in 19 counties. You got places that are almost the size of Rhode Island that we have to patrol in. The presence of our marked units versus unmarked units, and the public that we deal with that are now coming up from the city, that have dealt with the city aspects of last year, right? And now they're coming up here. So the risk has increased. There's more people that have seen, and after all the stuff with the optics of law enforcement, inclusion, diversity, CRT, critical race theory, and enticing the flames to people feel like, oh, I could say whatever I need to say, from ages of 16 all the way up to 70 years old. So the likelihood of a police officer in the DEP that are patrolling 19 counties, those statistics have increased dramatically. And the public's eye. I mean, I know that we have a certain standpoint within the DEP right now that we've been, what I like to say, we've been reformed before even NYPD and before all these other law enforcement in these other communities and countries. We've been reformed since almost 2003, really. I mean, we started really hot, and then somewhere around 2014, we kind of, we're going to slow things down. But it doesn't matter. You're driving around with marked units. You're going to get into stuff no matter what. You can try to fight complacency all the time, but proactive, we went from proactive to this like in between reactive. And that's the part I think that when we're reactive is going to get a lot of officers on this job, particularly, into some sticky situations. I'll give you a scene. A few years back, we had 2 cops get into a cop-involved shooting. Late in the morning, perp went to the hospital, broke in, had the nurses there, gunpoint, stole his synthetic heroin, and then boom, we had a hit. They identified the vehicle, and now they're following the guy through the woods, and the guy's shooting back. There was no legal representation. They had a union, and there was no legal representation. And the way we handled it, and Garrity was completely, utterly thrown out, we handled it with ADA office.
Right. Yeah, sure. Just talk to the prosecutor who could charge you, possibly. Right.
Right. Like why would we do that? But this goes back to say that I think back then in that community, right, in Ulster County, we might have a little rapport with everyone. But with the optics that have happened now, you don't know what you're getting involved with. Matter if you're in, like I said, Delaware, one of the 19 counties, all the way down to the 5 boroughs in Kings County. You don't know, and you're taking that risk. You're always taking that risk.
Yeah, Matt, I was a suburban ADA, right? So we supported our police. It was very different when I started working in the city, and you saw the interactions with the NYPD and the DA's office, and they were always kind of standoffish with each other, right? I mean, we had a much better relationship. But even Nassau County PD, right, one of the largest police departments in the state outside of the city, you're going to go in to talk to a DA, you get a union rep, you get a lawyer, right? Because you're not on the same side in that situation. You're not going in there to process an arrest. You're not going in there to give an affidavit, or supporting deposition or whatever it is. You're there because you are potentially a target or a subject of criminal charges. And, 9 times out of 10, the DA will do the right thing. But you still might have to go into a grand jury. You might still have technically or possibly the option of getting indicted yourself if the grand jury votes the wrong way. You need someone there on your side, and the DA is not on your side, right? They are
prosecute
attorneys.
The law.
And they're politicians. District attorneys are elected officials, right? Whichever way the wind blows, that's where the DA is going to be going to. and that could be anti-law enforcement tomorrow. So you don't know.
And just a rough estimate, if we had our cops in all these other counties, let's just say some of the counties are pro-police, right? We drive by, we see flags, blue flags with flags on them, you know, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
And then we get to a certain city or township that it may not be pro-police, and boom, you're handling something because you had to drive to that reservoir on the way over, or there was a traffic stop, or you saw a state trooper and now you're involved with something. And it just blows my mind that how quickly things can go that bad for people.
Right. I mean, and it depends on who you're interacting with. And I mean, I'm not singling out any single group, but Kingston and Newburgh and Ramapo and Kiryas Joel are all very, very different towns than, you know, Woodbury or, you know, anywhere else you can think of. And we know why. And that doesn't mean that any of those places are bad or good. It's just a question of you need to know how the lay of the land is, and you need to protect yourself. That's most important. You want to be able to get up the next day and go back to work and not have to worry. And,
right.
You know, have as much ammunition on your side as you can. And,
yes.
You know, we're not talking about the ammunition on your belt.
Right. Right. Lastly, where do you see the Environmental Police Penalty Association in the future? Like, what do you? I know you and I talk a lot. We go back and forth with texting and emailing, and there's leads and referrals and back and forth, and obviously we set this legal action plan up, and it's so far working very well. We have about 56 members signed up now. Some are kind of been waiting a little more reluctant. We know that we have 219 police officers. I'm losing probably in the next few months, I'm losing quite a few. So I am tracking that as well. So even if we went down to say $190, right, 190 cops, we can support that, right? We can support 190 cops at any given time bonus, right? I mean, that's, so where do we see ourselves here? Like, what do you think we see ourselves?
Right. I mean, you don't have to be the strength of the E.P.B.A, you know, 20,000 cops strong to have good representation, right? You have to have a kernel of strength that you can build from. And, you know, the E.P.B.A is growing in a way that is distinguishing itself as a law enforcement unit, which is what's most important, right? You're not paving roads or, you know, any of the other possible people that, you know, we're currently associated with. You are police officers. And, you know, this could really be a movement throughout much of the kind of mid and upstate areas where other people will take from this same model and grow as individual units, not that it's all going to be one giant union, but, you know, to make sure that you get the protection that you need. And E.P.B.A is in that starring role, because you're going to be an inspiration to a lot of people if you do it right, and you're doing it right so far.
Thanks, I appreciate that. My board is really good at what they do. That the people, it's been really, again, it's been a long road, long time coming, but it's amazing to watch it progress and grow into what it is now. Obviously, we've talked about with what we've been doing with the intention of having the SBA with us, right? And we've talked about Andy Quinn, and you guys work with Andrew. Andrew's work with you. Can you just describe that relationship a little bit for us?
Sure. As I mentioned before, we're, you know, I've known Andy for probably he got the contract around 2005, I guess. So, you know, I've known him for 15, 16 years. He's an amazing lawyer. You know, I put myself at his equal, honestly, but he's very good.
Says the same thing about you, so it's vice versa. He'll get the same question when I interview him next. So
right. It's a mutual love fest. You know, but you know, he's handled a lot of the same types of matters, criminal matters, shootings, critical incidents, and you know, you have a strong with Andy. He's the primary lawyer for the SBA. So you've got the power of that union behind you. So whatever ultimate arrangement E.P.B.A makes with SBA to have that power, whether it's in the deep pocket or the influence or the connections, or just the resources that can be brought to bear if needed, God forbid, an E.P.B.A member has to draw on those resources. It's really important to have that. And Andy is one of those resources, and he's a great resource to have. Very strong lawyer with deep roots in law enforcement. I think he was a Westchester ADA to begin with, and then, started doing the same stuff that I have.
I like always talking with Andy, and I always like talking with you. You guys always fulfill me with more knowledge, and the respect that you guys have for law enforcement LEOs, and the respect within the communities that I talk to various people about. Both names keep circling around. So I don't like to toot the PBA's horn here, but we did the right thing. And since then, I've seen, again, like I said, we've seen progression. I think that a lot of us, whether you're the cop that's in the car, you're the cop that's in the booth, whether you're wearing a blue uniform, green uniform, whether you're doing whatever it is out there in the DP atmosphere, it is imperative that we have our lawyers. We have a relationship with our attorneys. We have a relationship with the community that's around that. And we have that relationship with people that can understand and interpret what law enforcement officers have to do. If you have to litigate for yourself and be the judge and jury, we're talking about Judge Dredd then. That's not the world we live in. I know there's some of my friends that are cops that would love to have that world, but that's not the reality of our world right now. And I believe the people that we've set up and how we've been able to achieve this, and I don't know if this is going to be backwards or not. We started doing the cards, right? We started putting the names. We did the ROR, the rules of representation, and we're being able to give that to a member that signs up with legal action, and they can keep that in their back pocket. And every year, we can progress and further. But right here, we have your email, we have your phone number, we have all the stuff we need. God forbid we have to use those assets at any given moment. Again, like even last night, just to be able to email you and then you respond within like 10 minutes was fantastic.
Yeah, and I want whoever's watching this, not to be shy. If you've got an issue, if you've got a question, you've signed up for a reason. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree. Peter, people always thank and everything else, but I really, it's been a journey. You've come along with it. You've been loyal with us, and for that, I thank you so much, and your firm, and the people that work with you, and the staff. And I thank you so much for your time, even for tonight, just to sit down and take that time to explain to members what we're able to, basically what your capabilities are, what we're able to provide. And thank you so much. I really do. Peter Brill, please, if you got questions, email, anything, this is the man. Normally, if you CC me with Peter, it's fine, and then Peter takes the reins off, and we monitor that. With the legal action plan and everything in place, it's there, folks. We got it. We got a ringer. We got a bunch of other ringers, but we've got the ringer. So, and like we said, between 20 and 25, I'm going to go with a number of 25 officers on my list off the top of my head of what I look at through a situation page. We've helped a tremendous amount of cops already, even keep their jobs. So, Peter, thank you again for everything you do. I appreciate everything you do, man. I really do.
Thanks, man. My pleasure.